Hello, everybody. My name is Amichai Pardo. I'm speaking to you from Tel Aviv. I'm an actor in the Orna Porat Theater for young audience. My mother is from Krakow, and I'm very honored to participate in the European Day of Jewish Culture and to be guest of the Jewish Galicia Museum. So I want to thank the organizers of this program, to Monica Stepien and to Tomasz Strug, and all the others that organized this event. What I want to talk with you today is about a journey. We are talking about a journey, but this is a journey of family of refugees. My family that had to run away from Krakow a couple of days before the war, World War II began, and all the 12,000 kilometers they made from Krakow eastward, and then in a very long way until they arrived to Palestine, to the land of Israel. But I want also to talk with you about the two journeys I made to Poland, one 20 years ago and one couple of years ago. That these journeys were in a way journey to my identity, my Polish identity, my Krakowian identity, and the change that I had in my relations with Krakow, the hometown of my mother. So let's start. Here we have make share screen, and we can start. So my name is Amichai Pardo, and I'm an actor of the Orna Porat Theater for young audience, and my mother is Krakowian, but as you hear, my name Pardo is Italian, because my father was Italian, and we grew up in a very Italian family. We ate pasta every day. We speak Italian frequently. We have a family in Italy. But when I entered to the Orna Porat Theater, I began to specialize in portraying historical figures. For example, in historical monodramas for children, for young audience. For example, Theodor Herzl, the visionary of the state of Israel. Eliezer Ben Yehuda was the big fighter for the revival of the Hebrew language to be a spoken language. And Janusz Korczak, the Polish Jewish pedagogue from Warsaw. And 20 years ago, I was invited to perform in an international theater festival for young audience in Warsaw, with this monodrama of Janusz Korczak. And for me, it was really an opportunity. It was the first time to go to Poland. Because my mother, I asked her to go to Poland together when she was alive, and she refused. It was, I think, too painful for her. Until now, I'm not sure if what was too painful because the memories of the war, but also too painful to overcome the gap between a beautiful childhood and memories she had from Krakow, from Zakopane, from being a child, riding bike, climbing mountains in Krakow, that in one day all her childhood finished. So I think it was also difficult to her to come back to the good memories before the war and to understand what life she could have if there was no war. So instead of this, I went to my uncle and asked him. I told him I'm going to Warsaw, but I will go to Krakow, of course, and they want to know where you lived and where was the school, or if you have special private things that I can visit in Krakow. And he stopped and told me a sentence that I will never forget. He said, if you want to look for your family in Poland, don't go to Krakow, go to Auschwitz-Birkenau. And I was shocked, but I said, okay, I will go there, but what I'm interested is in the life of the family before the war. So with this a bit knowledge that he gave me, I went to Poland. And the first interaction with Poland was very, very confusing because like every Israeli, I think that comes to Poland at the first time, he has all these studies about Holocaust and about the war in his head. Every tram is a tram that is going to Treblinka. And you have all the stories of the family, of the war and of your family in the war in your head. But on the other hand, something was so familiar because first of all, these items that you see here now, the crochet, the herbate, the cake, everything reminded me the apartment of my grandmother, and even the language. It was not like going to United States or to France. It was a language that I didn't understand, but was so familiar. All these sentences like wszystkiego dobrego, dziękuję bardzo, tak, tak, no. All these sentences were so familiar for me. So it was very confusing because I was in the 70s, in the home of my grandmother, and in the time of the Holocaust, but also in present because I knew I'm going to perform to the children of today, that they are also different. So it was very confusing and I didn't know in which time I am. And with this ambivalent feeling, I went to Krakow and I saw the apartment of my family in Krakow in Kraszeniego Street 24. And I went to see the Wisła River, and I went to see Collegium Maius to see where the aunt of my mother made her PhD there in 1919 in history of art. And of course, I went also to Auschwitz-Birkenau, and then also to the cemetery to see the grave of my grandfather, and to the synagogue, the temple synagogue, when my family used to attend before the war. And with all this information, I went back to Warsaw, made a performance, it was a big success, and I came back to Israel. So some words about my Polish family. On August 28, 1939, August 28, 1939. So it's like a week before Nazis enter into Krakow. My grandfather, Karol Pisek, aged 44, took his wife, Irena, aged 37, her one-legged mother, Josefa, aged 64, and their two children, Anita and Vitek. Anita, my mother, Vitek, my uncle, and they began to run away eastward. To make the long story short, on December 1942, all the 5 heroes of our journey, of our story, arrived safely to Palestine, to the land of Israel. In the 60s, my mother, Anita, already had 4 sons. I'm the youngest, Amichai. The name is My People is Alive, and this is Kariel, the first one, after Carol, my grandfather, Eldad Yosef, after Josefa, Ilan Ephraim, after the family Formovich, and myself. And my grandmother, Irena, decided to tell us, these children, young children, to tell us the story of the family. And for this, she painted 32 color paintings that depict all the story of the family during the war. And also she wrote a diary. This is the original diary that my mother translated into Hebrew. So the story of the family was told to us in 3 different ways. The diary, Journey to the Land of Israel, the color painting depicting the story of the journey, and historical documents like photographs, memoirs, letters, and the diary and the painting depict a journey of this family of refugees from Krakow eastward to Tarnów, to Zamość, to Lviv, and then in a cattle train they were forced to go to Siberia, to a forced labor camp. And only after 2 years where the camps were open, they went down to Uzbekistan, to Tehran, and from then to Iraq, to Jordan, and to Jerusalem, to the land of Israel, to Palestine. And all these 5 heroes of our story are not alive anymore. And a couple of years ago, I realized that if I will not tell their story, no one will. So I came back to the paintings and I began to show them to different friends, people from different fields of knowledge, and I saw that everyone saw the same paintings in a different way. And I understood that to understand what really happened and to tell it, I have to put all these puzzle pieces together. Because there was the historical point of view, the artistic point of view, the educational point of view, the psychological point of view. Each one looked at the paintings and talked from his point of view. And I understood that I have to put all the puzzle pieces together, as I told you. So let's start and see the first painting. The first painting is really the day where they run away. They leave their beautiful apartment in Krakow, in Krasiniego Street, Krasiński 24, in Krakow on August 28, 1939. So historically, it was really 1 week before the Nazis entered Poland, and people that really understood what's going on, like my grandfather, that he was, because of his work from time to time in Austria, and he saw the Anschluss. People like him knew that they have to run away, and they had also the money, the ability to do it, and to take the family and to run away. When I talk to someone from more artistic point of view, she told me, you see these scales, like your grandmother, I want to say that the descending of the family from their level as an aristocratic family in Krakow to now to be a family of refugees. So this going down, and this is what is leaving Krakow, is going down. And also she said, you see that this painting is two sides, like masters and servants. Like there is this division between two parts in the painting. From the educational point of view, it was important to my grandmother, because this was the only painting where you see their apartment, to show us the inside of their apartment, like to show us, maybe we don't have a lot of money in Israel, but there in Poland, we were a very respected family. We had like pieces of art on the walls, we had a chandelier, we had nannies, etc. But when I sat with a psychologist, she told me, why we don't see a full family, like father, mother, and two children? Why your mother is with the nannies? And when we talked about, we understood that really in this first day of the family, my mother stops to be a 12 years old child, but she begins to be one that has to take on herself the family and take responsibility on the family, and this will be through all the way. And we know that many families of refugees, the teenagers has to take on themselves things that maybe even their parents can adapt to the change of the situation. Second paintings is from Zamość. Anita and her father are in a potato field. The father is running to cover the girl. Historically, many people thought in terms of World War I. They thought that if they will cross the Wieprzь River or one of the rivers, the war will stop by the river, and then they will be safe and they can stay there, wait until the war will end and go back to their home in Krakow. But immediately they understood how wrong they were and how the Nazis had these planes that came to Zamość to bomb the train station and the power station, and then to shoot at civilians. So this was totally a different war. And in one day, they understood they are inside a very, very big and different war. From the artistic point of view, I put this photo that is from Prague, where the invasion of the communist army, the Soviet army into Prague, because you see many artistic works, especially photographs, to see the civilians trying to stop a very strong military with their bare hands. And also here you see the civilians that are victims of the war. From the educational point of view, what was important to my grandmother to say is, you see Anita, you see your mother, how brave she was, how she didn't have fear. She went to collect the potatoes because we didn't have food, and she was so brave and she never feared from anything. But when I sat with psychologists and also with myself, I asked myself why the child is the one that has to risk herself. And as I told you, in many families of refugees, the teenagers are the one who have this, they adapt to the situation, they understand the situation, and they take on themselves their families. So in paintings, you can tell historical facts, and for example, you see everything in colors, like we are used to see World War II in black and white, and here it's everything's colored, and you see this little, every for every painting is telling us one story about their running away, and we can understand. But there is also a lot of meaning to the text of the diary, because there you can find things that maybe you will not find in the paintings. So we are now in this cattle train from Lviv to Siberia, 2 weeks that they were there in this cattle train, like many Poles. As you, I guess, know, the communists tried to take all the people that they felt that they can be danger to their regime. So all the officers from military or rich families or bourgeois or people that were very nationalist, Polish nationalist, each one that they thought that is not communist, they took him to Siberia. But we see this photograph and we see the family closed in the cattle train. You see my mother, my uncle, my grandfather, grandmother, and my great-grandmother, the one-legged Josefa. And they are very sad, very desperated. But is this the whole picture? And I will read you the text from the diary, and you see that it is not the whole picture, because this was not the whole picture that was in these cattle trains. And I'm quoting. At the station, they loaded everyone into a cattle train, about 50 to 70 people per wagon. The wagons were closed from the outside, and all the miserable, caged up people were transported for 2 weeks to the east. The wagons traveled closed, and inside there was intense heat, a lack of water, and they couldn't see anything out of the small windows. The people grew weak from lack of food and water. There was a small hole in the floor in the middle of the wagon which served as a toilet. Several dozen people who didn't know each other washed and used the facilities in public. From day to day, we descended to a level of animals, and then the egoistic, instinctive qualities of human being were revealed. Envy, quarrels over a glass of milk or a mug of hot water from the engine. Whoever didn't hold out and died was removed at night. It was impossible to sleep at night. The engine whistled constantly and the children cried. There was a shortage of air to breathe. So this is not this picture, but you see all these 50 and 70 people together clothed in this wagon. And the diary is telling us the true picture, maybe because my grandmother knew that she's telling us what happened. She didn't want to paint this. She wanted to tell us how they overcome, and not only how they suffered. And you all know about Siberia. Many hundreds of thousands of Poles arrived to Siberia, and we all know the stories from Siberia, from the forced labor camps there. But for my grandmother, this was not the story, but this was the story. Because this, what she wanted to say, how she made this chat, this place where they lived, to be a home, how she put plants, and she colored things, and they made furnitures, and how they even, as she told me, and she wrote it in the diary, they made fashion shows with Polish clothes because they wanted to remember Poland, and they even read out loud poems of Mickiewicz, of Tuvim. They even read out loud private letters that they received from occupied Poland. So it was make them like a close, intimate community. This home became like a cultural center. And also you see the children that are learning according to the Polish curriculum. They didn't attend to the Soviet school, but learned with this Professor Leonovich. They told them about, and they studied with the Polish curriculum in Polish language and Polish literature. But as the keeping the Polish identity existed alongside with the fight for the Jewish culture and the Jewish identity. As you all know, there in Siberia, it was forbidden to have religious ceremonies for Christians, for Jews, but when they wanted to make Yom Kippur prayings, so they found a secret place in the forest, and they arrived there without no one knowing, and there they prayed, and there they made Yom Kippur. I put this painting of Maurizio Gottlieb, that he painted this in 1878 in Krakow, and I'm sure that my grandmother was influenced from this beautiful and important painting when she painted her painting. We see the keeping of the Jewish identity also with this Haggadah of Pesach. The Haggadah is these books that we are reading in Passover, that is telling the story of the people of Israel, how they also made a big journey from Egypt to the land of Israel. And this Haggadah was printed in Warsaw in 1928, and they kept it, and we have it with us today. So 12,000 kilometers, many things were broken, many things they had to sell to get money, many things got lost. This they kept. And as you see here in the Haggadah, there are these drawings, you know, in synagogues. We don't see paintings like in a church, but in the Haggadah, there are drawings because we want the children to hear and to be connected to the story of their people. And the same thing my grandmother did. She painted paintings to tell us, the children, the story of our family and our people. In November 1941, the gates of the camps were open, and this happened because the Operation Barbarossa began. The Soviets, the Nazis began the Barbarossa operation and wanted to arrive to Moscow, to Leningrad, and they began a war against the Soviets. At this moment, the Soviets made an agreement with the Polish government in exile in London. And in this agreement, the Sikorski-Maisky agreement, they created the Anders, they decided to create the Anders army, and the gates of the camps were open. But my family didn't go away immediately, but they waited for a very good Christian friend of them that was dying, and they didn't want to leave her there in the middle of the snow in Siberia, and they waited until she died to bury her in a respectable Christian ceremony. And my grandmother painted this for us to tell us that there in Siberia there was a friendship and collaboration between Christian and Jews in the camps, and each one helped each other. Sometimes the Christian would work in Shabbat and the Jew would work in Sunday to cover each other so they can manage to keep the religion. So it was very important for her to tell us this friendship between Jews and Christians there in Siberia. And then this sentence arrived in the diary. The connection with our family members who stayed in Galicia was stopped. The correspondence and packages didn't arrive anymore, because till there they received letters and packages from Galicia. And what we know, that they didn't know at that time, that this point where the Barbarossa operation arrived, the Nazis began their mass killing against Jews. So each paper, this is a witness, daf ed, witness paper from the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. And each one of these was killed in one of the death camps in Poland. So all these pages are real names and relatives of my family. It's dozens of people that it's not only packages that didn't arrive, it means that all these dozens of people who didn't run away from Krakow or from other places, they were killed during the Holocaust. So when we see all the story of refugees of the family, we see that more than 25% of the paintings depict a home. And I want to say that for them, all this journey was before going to the land of Israel, was going to find a home and maybe to come back to Poland. So this is a home in Zamość where a Nazi tried to take their home and they refused, and then in Siberia, and this is in Uzbekistan, and this is in Tehran, and this is in Tel Aviv, and there are more like this. So you see that every refugee, what he wants is a home. He's looking for a home. He doesn't care where and which home, but just having a place for himself. From this home, he can dream to come back to his hometown. And this is from Uzbekistan. This is a Jew that took the goats out so that they can get in and have a place to stay in. And there also, they hear the trumpet of Krakow and they understand there is the Anders army in Uzbekistan, and my grandfather is joining the Anders army, but immediately gets ill, and the Anders army goes to Tehran, and there is a big decision to make if to stay with him or to go with as a family of the army, because he was part of the Anders army. And he encouraged his wife to take the children and their mother and to go out from the Soviet Union and to go to Tehran. So when they arrived in Tehran, we don't have Carol. Carol was so important in every step they made until here. He was the one who had the motivation and the knowledge and the practical thing of how to to overcome, how to survive, how to stay alive. And they are alone there with many Poles died there because in Siberia there were no virus or maladies because everything was under -40. But there in Tehran, a lot of people got many diseases and began to die like flies. And this is my uncle, and these doctors are saying that he is already dead. And this is my grandmother. This is a very dramatic point when she is pretending that she's a nurse just to stay with her son. And she convinced a doctor to give it another try, give it another shot. Maybe he can save her son. And he decided in the middle of the night to take blood from her, from my grandmother, and to put it in the body of the child. And 18 times in doing it again and again, giving infusion of blood from her to him, and he opens his eyes. And this is a story that was always told in our family, how she saved this 8 years old child that was considered dead, that later on he is going to be a professor of history of art in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. But what I was interested, what happened to his sister at this time, because she was alone with her one-legged grandmother. This is what happened to her, and it's difficult to hear. Anita used to travel to Tehran and sell clothes in the market and buy food and medicines. She would bring milk, coffee, and wine. Every trip of Anita's to the city was a nightmare for me. The city was 4 kilometers away, and private cars used to wait beside the camps, and young men would invite women to travel for free. After that, they would invite them to restaurants, and in this way, they had hungry European women and girls for free. I would order Anita to take the bus, but in Tehran, the European didn't ride on the buses which were meant for poor Iranians, and they stole everything from the passengers. I trembled with fear when the girl didn't arrive before dark. Of course, she received all kinds of offers on the way. In that country, girls marry at the age of 13, and she, wearing dresses that were too short for her, looked pretty and older than her age. So the mother had to decide if to stay with her son or with her daughter, and she decided to save the life of the son, but this is an unbearable decision. It's only in circumstances of war we have to have these decisions. Then what happens that my grandfather felt better and followed the army from Uzbekistan to Tehran and met the family in Tehran, and with all many initiatives and ideas, he succeeded to take the family to Jerusalem. So all the family arrived safely into Jerusalem, into the land of Israel. After doing all the research, I felt that now I'm prepared to tell the story to other people. And I began to tell the story also to Poles and to bring to Krakow the documents, the photographs, the memoirs, the letters, many things that I even didn't understand what was written there. And when I did so, it's the first time I understood that this story is not a Jewish story. It's a Polish story of so many hundreds of thousands of Poles that ran away from the Nazis, were taken by the Soviets. Some of them were killed on the way, some died on the way, some arrived to Siberia. From Siberia, many of them went to Uzbekistan, created the Anders Army. Many of them died in Tehran. And until the point of Tehran, it's the same story for Jews and non-Jews. Only the last part of going to the land of Israel is different. And when I saw it, and when I came back to Poland, now I was prepared to hear the point of view of the Poles, to listen what was the war like for them, how they suffered in the war, to understand what was it like to be under the Nazi occupations, not only for the Jews, but for the whole Poles. And this began the opportunity for me to see Poland of today, to enjoy Poland, to enjoy the food, to enjoy the people, to make interactions, to go to the Jagiellonian University, to teach students some words of theater in a lesson I gave them, about words that are connected to theater, to tell them my story, to hear their stories, why they want to learn about Judaism. So this became a new bridge, a new dialogue that maybe my mother couldn't do it, but I felt that I can do it. And then there was this year, the connection with the Jewish Galicia Museum, with Tomasz Strug and Paulina Banasik, that created this beautiful, amazing exhibition, Odomu Dodomu, From Home to Home, that depict all the story of my family. That was this year in the Jewish Galicia Museum. And this was also a combination with the Institute of Jewish Studies of the Jagiellonian University, and with Professor Michal Galas and Dr. Eva Benjin from the Herzl Center in the Institute of Jewish Studies. So again, I want to thank you all for listening to me, and I want to thank all the organizers of the European Day of Jewish Culture. Hope to see you next time in Krakow. All the best. Thank you so much.